A very good morning to all the participants for the second day conference. Today we have with us an eminent speaker, Dr. Sri Rama Shetty from the Department of Medicine, Cellular and Molecular Biology, Texas, USA. Sir, a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
Yes, I now call upon Anjali, our final year biotech student, to have a brief introduction of you, sir. Yes,
Sure.
over to Anjali.
Good morning, everybody. Today I would like to introduce Dr. Sriram Shetty, who is a professor of medicine, cellular and molecular biology at the University of Texas Health Science Center, Tyler, Texas. He has completed his master's in bioscience in the year 1986 and has a PhD from Mangalore University, Mangalore, India, completed in 1991. Dr. Sri Rama Shetty has over 80 papers published in several well-known journals and has 6 patents to his name. He has presented his research at various conferences and symposiums. He has been a manuscript reviewer for various reputed peer-reviewed journals and has also been a member of several grant review committees. Dr. Sri Rama Shetty has been bestowed with several awards and fellowships, including Senior Research Fellowship from Department of Science and Technology, Government of India, and a postdoctoral research associateship from the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, Government of India. He has been working on therapy for treatment of COVID-19 related to lung disease and has received a grant of $300,000 for his research. Dr. Sri Rama Shetty's research interests include lung epithelial biology, airway and alveolar remodeling, epigenetic control of the lung injury and fibrosis, pharmacokinetics and toxicology of peptide therapeutics. We welcome you, sir.
Thank you. Can I have the slides, please?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We'll move the slides.
Sure. So should I close all those other windows here, or little like people and all those things, or?
No need, sir. Let it be like that, sir.
Okay. Thank you, and good morning, everybody. My name is Sriram Shetty. I work for University of Texas Health Science Center at Tyler, Texas. I thank Professor Ijjwal for inviting me to speak. And today I'm going to discuss about caveolin-derived peptide drug treatment for pulmonary fibrosis. Next, please. Next slide, please. Before getting into the actual topic, it is customary to discuss about conflict of interest. I have patent issued to use both CSP and its deletion fragment CSP7. It's also called the LTA03 for treatment of lung fibrosis. I serve as a consultant for Lung Therapeutics Inc., a University of Texas startup biotech company commercializing CSP7 for treatment of IPF. I have equity position and also invested in this company. Next slide, please. So what is pulmonary fibrosis? It is a heterogeneous group of nearly 200 types of interstitial lung diseases. Interstitial lung diseases are characterized by lung inflammation and scarring that damages the ability of lung tissues to absorb external environmental oxygen from the external air. Nearly 250,000 of Americans are living with pulmonary fibrosis or related interstitial lung diseases. Approximately 50,000 new cases are reported annually in the US alone. And there are 40,000 deaths are also reported in the US alone. And interstitial lung disease, particularly pulmonary fibrosis, is difficult to diagnose and can be debilitating, and there is no effective cure. Next slide, please. So, what is IPF? It's a dominant form of interstitial lung disease characterized by scarring of the lung tissues, which leads to progressive decline in lung function due to chronic lung injury and loss of alveolar epithelial cell renewal capacity, as shown in this cartoon, mainly because of increased apoptosis and senescence of progenitor type 2 cells, which divide and differentiate into type 1 cells. And this damage to the alveolar parenchyma contributes to the activation of fibroblasts, what we call activated fibroblasts or myofibroblasts. It's also called fibrotic lung fibroblasts. These fibroblasts resist apoptosis, and also they exhibit increased rate of proliferation, invasion, and migration. And also because of their virtue of their activation, they also deposit a massive amount of extracellular matrix protein like collagen, fibronectin, and other matrix proteins in the alveolar space, particularly in the interstitial space, as shown in the matrix. This leads to a thickening of the space and also contributes to stiffening of the lung. And fibrosis is a restrictive lung disease where we cannot expand the lung and patient cannot inhale the air. Next slide, please. So what are the common symptoms of interstitial lung disease or pulmonary fibrosis? Most of the symptoms are generic, such as shortness of breath, dry hacking cough, fatigue and weakness, discomfort in the chest, finger clubbing, mainly because of excessive growth of soft tissues underneath the nail to compensate for low peripheral oxygen level. And this IPF or interstitial lung disease are more prevalent in people in their 50s or older, and also more common in male than females. Next slide, please. So what are all the causes contributing to development of pulmonary fibrosis? Mostly airborne contaminant due to environmental pollution, cigarette smoke exposure. Patients with emphysema, often nearly 15 to 20% of these patients also develop pulmonary fibrosis. Thoracic radiation to treat cancer, particularly breast, lung, esophageal, and certain types of lymphoma, also leads to development of radiation-induced pneumonitis or fibrosis. And drug-induced fibrosis is induced by certain types of drugs. And genetic or familial fibrosis, nearly 10 to 20% of the pulmonary fibrosis is caused by mutation in surfactant-producing gene, which leads to familial fibrosis. And patients with autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis and other related diseases are also prone to development of pulmonary fibrosis. Pulmonary fibrosis caused by unknown reason or unknown cause is called idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, which is one of the lethal and more predominant form of interstitial lung diseases. Next slide, please. So what are the treatments? As I mentioned before, there is no effective cure. Most of the treatments are to provide symptomatic relief, like supplemental oxygen, providing supplemental oxygen, pulmonary rehab to improve respiration, medication. In 2017, there are two drugs came to FDA approved two drugs for treatment of IPF. One is called nintedanib and the other one is pirfenidone. They are not effective in the sense they slow the decline in function, but these drugs do not halt the progression of the disease or reverse the existing pulmonary fibrosis. More than this, they have off-target effect, which is particularly skin and gastrointestinal related side effect, which leads to discontinuation of the drug. And most effective drug is most effective treatment is lung transplantation in advanced cases. However, availability of healthy lung tissues and also post-transplant success beyond 6 years is very low, unlike other organ transplantation, mainly because lung is often exposed to external air. Next slide, please. So in our lab, we mostly focused on caveolin protein, which is a coat protein of invagination in the membrane called caveolae. And then we found that several signaling intermediates interact with the scaffolding domain of the protein, scaffolding domain of cavelin. So we thought of developing a peptide to use as a decoy to compete with the signaling intermediates so that we can nullify this effect to mitigate lung epithelial injury. So we developed a peptide initially of 20 amino acid, and as you may be aware that bleomycin, which is a DNA damaging agent, it induces epithelial injury by inducing p53 as a safeguard mechanism to prevent cells undergoing DNA damage to develop into undergoing tumorigenesis. So as you can see here, mice exposed to bleomycin develop induce cleaved caspase 3 or activated caspase 3, which is a classic marker of hepatosis, than uninjured control mice exposed to saline. And we treated these mice with CSP, a 20 amino acid fragment of cavelin, which suppressed epithelial cell hepatosis mainly by blocking p53 expression, which is otherwise induced due to DNA damage. And we made series of overlapping deletion. We found that 7 amino acid sequence present in the cavelin scaffolding domain called CSP7 mimic their full anti-apoptotic activity of full-length peptide. One interesting aspect of this peptide is that it does not affect normal cells where the balance of p53 and MDM2 is intact. It only affects cells where p53 expression is altered, like injured epithelial cell. Next slide, please. In clinical setting, most of patients with IPF often come with advanced stages of disease after developing respiratory problems, particularly breathlessness. So targeting or inhibiting epithelial cell injury by targeting epithelial cell, thinking that it will prevent development of fibrosis, may not be useful or feasible in clinical setting. So we thought maybe whether this peptide could inhibit the amplification of activated fibroblasts or myofibroblasts, which is one of the main cells which is contributing to deposition of excessive amount of messenger proteins like collagen, tenascin, fibronectin, and also alpha SMA, which is a myofibroblast marker. So therefore, we isolated fibroblasts from IPF lungs and treated them with this with both full length as well as CSP7. And we initially looked into the changes in pro-fibrogenic markers, mostly extracellular matrix proteins like collagen, tenascin, fibronectin, and SMA. And we found that this peptide suppressed their expression. And we also looked into p53, like tumors, 50% of tumor cell, IPF fibroblasts also lack p53 expression. Probably this provides a proliferative advantage for these cells. So we found that baseline expression is low in this IPF fibroblasts. However, treatment with either full-length peptide or CSP7 restored baseline p53 expression while inhibiting the expression of pro-fibrogenic marker proteins. Then we made series of mutation and deletion. However, removal of even one single amino acid from the 7 amino acid lost both anti-apoptotic and anti-fibrotic effect of this peptide. So we decided to keep 7 amino acid as a minimum sequence required for its biological activity. Next slide, please. Next, we wanted to test whether this peptide can resolve existing pulmonary fibrosis. So we developed a preclinical mouse model of lung fibrosis by exposing the mice to intratracheal bleomycin. And we noticed that mice exposed to bleomycin develop full-blown fibrosis by day 14, whereas human needs at least 50 years to develop lung fibrosis. And we later treated these mice with CSP7 for 7 days, 5 days a week for 7 days, at a dose of 1.5 milligram per kilogram. And we saw there was a significant increase in overall survival, with otherwise nearly 50% of mice died due to fibrosis. We also saw there was a significant improvement in gross body weight, which is also declining in mice with lung fibrosis. When we analyze the lung, when we subject these mice for CT scan, micro CT scanning, we saw there is a grayish material, mostly because of fibrosis in mice with bleomycin-induced fibrosis. These are cleared in those received CSP7 for 7 days. And we also saw there was a decline in lung volume, mostly because of restricted nature of the fibrosis. However, mice received CSP7, we saw there was an increased lung volume and also compliance and reduction in lung resistance, suggesting that there is improved lung function, while those received control peptide of same sequence in a scrambled order failed to reverse the bleomycin-induced fibrosis. Next, we analyze the lung homoid for pro-fibrogenic marker, for fibrosis marker like hydroxyproline, which is often increased in fibrotic lung tissues, fibrotic tissues. And as you can see, there is a significant increase in total hydroxyproline content in mice with bleomycin-induced fibrosis compared to unused mice exposed to saline. However, mice received CSP7 for 7 days from 2 batches showed significant separation of total hydroxyproline content in the lung tissue, suggesting resolution of existing fibrosis. And mice received control peptide shield showed elevated collagen hydroxyproline content in the lung tissue, suggesting ongoing fibrosis. Next, we analyzed the lung tissues of mice stained with the trichrome, which is detects collagen and other extracellular matrix protein, and also we subject them to HND stain to look into the alveolar architecture. As you can see, mice exposed to bleomycin showed massive deposition of collagen and other matrix protein in their interstitium. This contributed to destruction of alveolar distal lung architecture, and mostly because of deposition of matrix protein. However, mice received CSP7 for 7 days showed the clearing of these matrix proteins, and we saw the preservation of intact alveolar sacs and restoration of lung architecture, while those received control peptide shield showed massive collagen and other matrix proteins, and which contributed to the distortion of lung architecture. Next slide, please. One of the major problems with the preclinical model is like pulmonary fibrosis caused by bleomycin or TJ-beta induced lung fibrosis. They spontaneously resolve after 3-4 months after after development of fibrosis. However, human IPF is irreversible. So we wanted to test this drug in a model where pulmonary fibrosis is irreversible. So we exposed the mice to low dose of bleomycin every alternate week, 8 times during 4 months period. And we left the mice for a week and then treated them with either full-length peptide or a fragment for 2 weeks and left the mice for 1 week to recover. And later subjected them. Later we tested these mice for changes in pulmonary fibrosis, and we found there was a significant improvement in overall body weight. And also when we subjected these mice for micro-CT and pulmonary function tests, we saw there was a clearing of matrix protein and fibrosis. And also we saw significant improvement in lung volume and lung compliance and reduction in resistance, suggesting improved lung function. When we analyze the lung homogenate for hydroxyproline, again, like 1X bleomycin-induced lung fibrosis, we saw there was a significant increase in total hydroxyproline content, which was significantly reduced in mice received either full-length peptide or a CSP7 for 2 weeks, 5 days a week for 2 weeks. And we analyze the lung sections which are stained for trichrome and HND. Like 1X bleomycin-induced fibrosis, we saw massive collagen deposits in mice with 8X bleomycin-induced fibrosis, which contributed to destruction of distal lung architecture. However, those mice received CSP or CSP7, there was minimal deposition of collagen and the matrix protein, and also restoration of alveolar air sacs, while those exposed to control peptide shield showed massive collagen deposits in their interstitial space. Next slide, please. IPF is a chronic disease. Patient cannot afford to visit clinic on a daily basis. So we thought probably we can deliver this drug via airways like asthma drug using inhaler. So we formulated CSP7 in lactose, and we delivered the lactose CSP7 lactose formulation to mice with existing bleomycin-induced fibrosis using a nebulization tower. And we found there was a significant improvement in overall survival in mice received CSP7 at a dose which is 44 less than the IP dose. And also we saw there was a significant increase in weight gain and pulmonary function. Test also showed improvement in lung functions. When we analyzed the lung homogenate, we saw there was a significant increase in total hydroxyproline content, which was significantly reduced in mice received CSP7, while those exposed to control peptide of scrambled sequence in lactose formulation or just placebo, which is lactose alone, failed to reverse this process. Next, when we analyzed the lung sections which are stained with trichrome or HND, we saw there was a massive collagen deposits in mice with 1X bleomycin-induced fibrosis. This contributed to loss of lung architecture. However, those exposed to CSP7 via airways reduced collagen and other matrix deposits markedly. This contributed to restoration of alveolar architecture, which is consistent with the improved lung function. Again, mice received placebo or control peptide shield showed collagen deposits and loss of lung function. Next slide, please. Next, we wanted to deliver this drug in dry powder form and see whether this is in CSP7 in dry powder form is effective against existing pulmonary fibrosis. Reason we are interested in dry powder form is because drugs in dry powder form are more stable and easy to store and transport, and also cost less for formulation, and also safer because of lack of excipients and other contaminating components. So we micronized the CSP7 to deliver to a distal lung and expose the mice using the nebulization tower. And we analyzed for weight gain. There was significant improvement in lung body weight gain. And also we saw there was significant increase in overall survival in mice exposed to micronized CSP7 at a dose 44 less than the IP dose. And we analyzed the lung homogenate. We also saw there was a significant increase in total hydroxyproline content, which was significantly reduced in mice exposed to micronized CSP7 or parent peptide by IP injection. When we analyze the lung sections, you can see there is a massive collagen deposits in mice with bleomycin-induced fibrosis, which also distorted lung architecture, which was cleared by CSP7 delivered in a micronized form at a dose 44 less than the IP dose. And there was no difference in terms of response, whether the peptide was given delivered in a dry powder form or by IP injection at dry powder dose, which is 40 times less than the IP injection dose. Next, we analyzed the lung homogenate for various pro-fibrogenic markers, mostly extracellular matrix protein like fibronectin, tenascin, collagen, and also SMA, which are all increased in fibrotic lung tissues. We also looked into TGF-beta and CTGF. These are the two pro-fibrogenic cytokines which are overexpressed in most of fibrotic tissues, including IPF lung tissues. However, treatment with either micronized CSP7 or full or parent peptide reduce the expression of these pro-fibrogenic cytokines as well as pro-fibrogenic markers, suggesting there is a resolution of existing fibrosis. Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, the radiation is one of the therapeutic radiation, one of the major problems associated with the lung fibrosis. And most of the time, they are patients are exposed to a suboptimal dose of radiation to mitigate or reduce the chance of developing pulmonary fibrosis. This often leads to survival of tumor cells, which develop into which later grow and contributes to tumor development, and they will be resistant for the treatment. So we wondered whether this drug can be effective against radiation-induced fibrosis. So we exposed the mice to thoracic radiation, and after 16 weeks, we saw there was a full-blown fibrosis, and later we treated them for 2 weeks, 5 days a week for 2 weeks of CSP7. And we saw there was a significant improvement in overall survival and also gain in total body weight. And when we looked into the pulmonary function following microCT rendition, we saw there was a significant improvement in overall pulmonary function, like it increased the lung volume and also increased compliance and reduced resistance. When we analyze the lung sections after trichome staining, we can see thoracic radiation or lung radiation caused massive collagen deposits, which are significantly reduced in mice received CSP7 for 2 weeks. When we analyze the lung homogenate again, we saw there was a massive increase in collagen, fibronectin, tenascin, and SMA, and also pro-fibrogenic cytokine like CTGF, TGF-beta, which are all reduced in mice exposed to CSP7. We also tested the mice, treated mice along with radiation to see whether it can prevent development of fibrosis. And we found that when the drug CSP7 was treated along with radiation one day before or on the same day, and it prevented development of fibrosis, suggesting that this peptide can be used to prevent as well as to treat radiation-induced lung fibrosis. Next slide, please. So other issue is silica-induced fibrosis. This is common in occupational workers, mostly in Texas. They extract oil from the shale rock. They fill the cracks to extract oil by filling with sand. So the workers are often exposed to tons and tons of crystalline silica, and also workers working in granite quarries, and also construction workers who lay granite countertops or flooring, and also agriculture workers and construction workers, coal miners, all develop lung fibrosis because of the chronic exposure to this material. So we wondered whether CSP7 can reverse silica-induced fibrosis. So we exposed the mice to silica for 54 days to develop full-blown fibrosis. Later, we treated the peptide for 7 days and for a week, 5 days per week for 7 days. And we found that this significantly improved overall survival and also increased body weight. When we analyzed the lung homogenate, we saw there was a significant increase in total hydroxyproline content in the lung tissues of mice exposed to silica. This was significantly reduced following treatment of these mice for a week with CSP7. And analyzed the trichome stained lung sections of mice with silica-induced fibrosis, we saw there was a massive collagen and other matrix protein deposits, which are significantly clear in mice received CSP7 for a week. When I analyzed the lung homogenate, we saw there was an increase in collagen, SMA, fibronectin, tenascin, indicating increased lung fibrosis in mice with silica-induced fibrosis compared to saline-treated control mice. However, mice with silica-induced fibrosis treated with CSP7 for a week caused a significant reduction in pro-fibrogenic markers like collagen, fibronectin, SMA, and tenascin, suggesting CSP7 is effective against silica-induced fibrosis. Next slide, please. So in addition to lung fibrosis, we also tested the drug for scleroderma or skin fibrosis or dermal fibrosis. We also tested them in preclinical mouse model of cardiac fibrosis induced by transaortic constriction, and also carbon tetrachloride induced liver fibrosis. And we found that peptide also effective against ophthalmic and renal fibrosis in preclinical models, suggesting that this peptide has a broader utility. Next slide, please. So in summary, CSP7 increases type 2 epithelial cell viability, mainly by inhibiting senescence or programmed cell growth arrest, and also apoptosis or programmed cell death, and it inhibits lung injury and prevents development of fibrosis. CSP7 increases baseline apoptosis and inhibits proliferation and extracellular matrix deposition by fibrotic fibroblasts or myofibroblasts. CSP7 resolves existing pulmonary fibrosis by concurrently targeting injured E2 cells and activated fibroblasts and multiple cytokine and signaling intermediaries. CSP7 can be delivered systemically or via airways by nebulization or dry powder inhalation. CSP7 has minimal effect in normal type 2 cells and fibroblasts and normal human lung tissues, mainly because of p53 balance is preserved in these tissues. Next slide, please. CSP7 is also called the LTO3, and this year it finished its safety phase 1A safety and pharmacokinetic studies, and it showed that there is no off-target effect, and we are planning to test this in patients with IPF maybe next year at that company. Thank you. Next slide, please. So there are many people worked. However, I listed some of the people here, and these are our lab group. Yashodhar Bhandari, who worked for nearly 10 years in my lab. Amarnath, he's also worked for 5 years, and several other people. And so they are all engaged in different various fibrosis model and also in vitro studies. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Professor Sriram Shetty, for that wonderful talk on caveolin and pulmonary fibrosis. And we are happy to say that Dr. Bhandari is also joined in for the presentation. Good. We have a few questions, sir. One is from Ms. Priyanka Chatterjee.
Yeah.
In chronic STAT cases, is CSP7 useful? And what is the cost of the treatment in India, possible cost?
I don't know. See, the thing is, I have already licensed to a company. They decide all this. So I'm not sure, because one of the major problem with this IPF is there are two things. One is good, one is bad. One is it's a chronic disease, so they have to treat this drug for long term. So even though cost of production is very cheap, like 7 amino acids, that clinical trial probably has to run for a year. So probably it will run in millions. So that, and they decide, and they most likely these startup companies, they generally commercialize or license to bigger companies. So we are just inventors. I don't know about commercial aspects.
Okay. And we have the second question by Ms. Runa Sur. What are the effects of CSP7 on normal lung cells?
It does not work at all. As I mentioned, when the cell is preserved, p53, it's ineffective. In fact, it does not alter at all. We tested that, and this has already went through dog studies, rat studies, before even touching the humans. And it went through human safety trial also in a dry powder form in Belfast, Ireland. So we didn't see any off-target effect. So basically, we don't know much as we go. Maybe long-term studies might tell us something, but so far there is no effect at all.
Okay, thanks. The next question is caveolin specific to lung cells, or do we see the expression in other cells?
No, caveolin is one of the unique drug in the sense, in injured epithelial cell, caveolin is increased, that sequesters some of the inhibitor which degrades p53. So when you give this peptide, it competes with that caveolin, which is otherwise increased in injured epithelial cell, so that it releases those inhibitors which suppresses p53 expression. Whereas in myofibroblast, as I mentioned, like 50% tumor cells, where let's say expression of p53 is very low, where caveolin is also low. Because of that, it's low p53. So in this case, peptide complements that function. In the injured epithelial cell, it serves as a competitor, whereas it complements in fibrotic lung fibroblast. So this drug, it makes sense, it is unique in the sense it has concurrently works differently in two types of cells. We also don't know how it works in other cells like macrophage, lymphocytes, and all. So we mostly focus on that, and then we focus mostly on translation aspects and delivery.
Okay. The next question is, how is caveolin expression affected in lung cancer? And a following question is there any association between smoking and caveolin expression?
Yes, like in epithelial cell, we see increased caveolin expression with bleomycin-induced injury. I had several grants from, one is from NIH and also from FAMRI, which is Flight Medical Research Institute, where we see that in alveolar type 2 cells, there is an increased caveolin expression in patients with COPD or mice exposed to chronic cigarette smoke exposure. However, their peptide works again and it suppresses epithelial apoptosis, just like what we see in bleomycin-induced lung epithelial cells. process. And also it inhibits mucus hypersecretion. And recently one of my postdoc, who is Dr. Nandini Das, she focused mostly on mucus expression. It suppresses mucus proliferation by airway epithelial cells. So it works both in the distal lung and mitigates emphysema-like phenotype, and also airway inflammation and hyperresponse, and often seen in smokers with patients with COPD. So it is effective in COPD. And the patent I have, which has to be licensed.
Okay. Another question is like virus entry is by caveole independent mechanism. So in this pretext, how caveole 1 can be useful in tackling or managing COVID?
I'm not sure. I have a grant which was last year. It came mainly probably they thought that it has already gone through phase 1 trial, so they funded it. And we don't do COVID test here, but it is outsourced to UT San Antonio, where they have the facility to deal with the testing in mouse model, mostly AZ2 mice, and they are testing it. And I'm not sure, because this peptide is ideal for chronic lung injury. I'm not sure whether it is that effective against acute lung injury. So,
okay.
But we are testing.
One more question, probably in the same line. Lung fibrosis is commonly seen in COVID-19, and can this be useful in such cases?
Sure, that is for sure. And it's mostly not only lung fibrosis, it also affects kidney, renal fibrosis and cardiac fibrosis, But what we are is, ours is a lung injury institute, so we mostly focus on lung fibrosis and focus on local delivery to minimize off-target effect or systemic distribution. But in the company, when I licensed to the company, they tested in different organ fibrosis to increase their bottom line most likely. So I'm sure it will work if there is a development of fibrosis, but it's too early to say that whether the patients who recovered from COVID are likely to develop fibrosis. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Probably in 1 or 2 years' time, we will know about that.
Okay. I think with the questions, I think we are done. And thank you very much, Professor, for your lively interaction session. Now I hand over the mic to Ms. Anjali.
Sure. Thank you.
Anjali, over to you.
Thank you, sir, for your... It was a wonderful and enlightening session on what is pulmonary fibrosis, what causes it, and how CSP7 and a combination of this peptide with other therapies help to limit, cure pulmonary fibrosis. Thank you once again, sir, for sparing your time to attend this conference.
Thank you very much.
Professor Sriram, sir, very much thanks.
Thanks.
And I appreciate your time for us and for all the participants here with your wonderful talk and informative session which we had. We look forward in future also to interact with you. Thank you once again.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Good night, sir.
Good night.